Haruto was a bullied loser who got reincarnated into a royal family, but was abandoned immediately for being weak. However, everything changes when he awakens his overpowered barrier magic and uses it to tame monster girls and crack everyone. Everything started when Haruto returned from school and hoped on his bed to watch his favorite anime recap. All of a sudden, a bright light engulfed him, and the next thing he knew, he was in the divine realm, where he was greeted by an anime goddess with jugs that defied the laws of gravity. Since Haruto was miserable in his previous life, Miss Jiggle selected him to be reincarnated and promised him overpowered abilities that would make his new life better. Presently, he's sent to a magical world where he is born as a prince, which means he can live a comfortable life as a useless shut-in. However, reality slaps him in the face when his father carries out a magical assessment on him and finds that he's a level 2. Seeing this, the king realizes that Haruto has no element, meaning that he's stuck with using barrier magic. Unable to bear the shame of having a weak offspring, Haruto's parents plan to announce that he died at birth, while ordering someone to dump him in the woods. In the meantime, the plot goddess is panicking because Haruto is a level 1002, but the device used to measure him can't measure past 99, and he has no element mastery, so all he can use is barrier magic. Back in the human world, Haruto is dumped in the woods, and he struggles to move. When he recalls that his father said he could use barrier magic, he tries to use it and somehow it works, allowing him to manipulate matter, which he then uses to fly. All of a sudden, a flame Fenrir named Flay, who hasn't eaten for 2 months, appears behind him and tries to eat him whole, but it fails because the barrier around Haruto is pretty strong. Seizing the opportunity, Haruto uses his magic and attacks Flay with trees. Since it does little damage, Haruto uses a spell to lift a large rock and aims it at Flay, so the monster starts begging for her life because she can't survive getting crushed. Haruto takes pity on Flay and then tries to communicate with her by enhancing his vocal cords with a spell. After he introduces himself, Flay is baffled because she's never felt so much mana coming from a mere human, but when it hits her that he might be the Demon King reincarnate, she starts shaking. Rather than tell the truth, Haruto claims he's the Demon King and begins aura farming until Flay wets the floor and starts begging for death. Seeing this, Haruto tells her she has nothing to worry about as long as she's a pick-me doggy who will let him exercise his stick from time to time. Flay loves this and decides to dedicate her life to him, but that's when Haruto becomes weak and falls to the ground. When Flay learns he needs sustenance, she assumes a human form and decides to become Haruto's super stepmommy.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Only to learn that she's got no milk in those jugs. Just then, Haruto hears someone approaching and sends Flay to check the person out. Turns out, it's a man named Gold, and he's Haruto's distant relative, who wants to save Haruto from the woods. After he reveals his intentions, he offers fresh milk to Frey to feed Haruto, but she refuses and asks why he cares so much. Gold replies that he's felt the pain of losing a son before, and he knows Haruto was abandoned for his lack of potential. He also won't stand Haruto suffering a fate so cruel because he believes that everyone deserves a chance to live, whether they are magically strong or not. After hearing this, Flay is moved to tears, while Gold decides to adopt Haruto and even offers to let Flay live with them. After Flay accepts the deal, Gold destroys Haruto's sleep sack and pours blood on it to fake Haruto's death before taking him home. 9 years pass, and Haruto has grown into a young man with a hot stepmom, Marianne, and a cute stepsister, Charlotte, who hates his guts. One morning after breakfast, Haruto is a bit bothered that his sister doesn't like him, so his new mom assures him that Charlotte will come around. However, Haruto begins to think that Charlotte has figured out that he's an old man who's almost 30, and he almost dies from a heart attack. Seeing his mood, stepmom advises Haruto to be a little nicer to Charlotte and join her out from time to time, but she doesn't know she's asking too much from Haruto because he's a die-hard shut-in. Later on, Haruto thinks about running away with Flay and exploring the world, but since Charlotte gets along with Flay pretty well, Charlotte will hate him even more if he separates the two of them. He then turns to his clone, which he's been working on for years, to ask for suggestions, but the clone is dead silent because it can't talk or move yet. On second thought, he figures he could make a clone for Flay as well and run away with her, but before he can start, Gold calls him out for training. Outside, Gold wants to teach Haruto how to wield a sword because he thinks Haruto's magic is useless, but as they start a sparring match, Gold is shocked at the amount of strength and speed Haruto has. Deep down, he assumes Haruto might have an innate awakening, but he doesn't pay attention to it and decides to continue training Haruto. Later that evening, Gold tells his wife that Haruto might be a demon, because not only is he super strong and fast for his age, his royal crest also holds strange powers. But Marianne is sure that Haruto is just a normal dude. One hot afternoon, Haruto lay on his bed doing absolutely nothing productive when noise suddenly erupted outside the castle. Immediately, he goes to check it out, and he finds out from Gold that his soldiers got jumped by the thieves in their province while they were trying to ambush them. Gold then informs him to return to the house because he believes he is too young to see something gruesome like that. He listens and heads back, but on his way, he overhears Flay mocking the injured soldiers like they're extras in a failed war movie, and that immediately pisses him off, so he snaps at her to shut her mouth. He continues walking as if nothing happened, but casually drops a healing spell on the soldiers. Later in the night, he wakes up from his deep sleep to go pee, but on opening the door, he sees Flay standing in front of it. He questions why she is in front of his room, but Flay remains mute, and he realizes that it is probably because he told her to shut up earlier. To make it up to her, he apologizes for losing his temper earlier and takes her to the rooftop to begin research on the guys responsible for the attack on Gold's soldiers. Thanks to one of his numerous magics, he shows her the surveillance footage of the area to find anything suspicious. While at it, they see some suspicious guys drinking in the woods, and he wonders if that was the spot his father's soldiers got ambushed. Flay points out that they may be spies, and he suggests they wipe them out to be on the safer side. So he creates a barrier magic that transports them to the spot, but unknown to them, Charlotte is looking at them through her room window. Shortly after, Haruto and Flay walk in on the suspicious guys talking about how they plan to get rid of Haruto's father the next time they see him. On noticing them, the guys quickly get into defensive mode, but Haruto quickly freezes them with his magic barriers. Haruto then finds out that they are soldiers from the neighboring empire trying to infiltrate their province under the guise of being thieves to cause internal mayhem. He also learns that they have an accomplice who led them into the province, and he concludes that somebody powerful must be behind them because it's not easy to infiltrate the province. This makes him worry that somebody may be after Gold's life, but before he begins to investigate that, he tells Flay to set the guys ablaze. Afterwards, they return to the castle, and on the way, he concludes in his mind that he's going to send an anonymous letter to Gold to let him know what happened. The next morning, Gold receives the news of the letter from his stewards at his home office, and he begins to worry about what the Empire may be up to. Charlotte, who is seated on his lap, innocently asks for the identity of the person who took down the guys. He replies that it's probably Flay since she's been roaming around flexing on monsters lately, so she must have encountered them during one of her outings. However, Charlotte is not convinced by his logic, so she leaves him after making up an excuse to begin her own investigation because she suspects Haruto. She runs into Flay in the hallway soon after and immediately asks if there are two Harutos in the castle. Confused, Flay asks why she came up with such crazy logic. Charlotte then explains how she went to Haruto's room to confirm if it was him she saw flying the previous night, but on getting there, she sees Haruto sleeping peacefully, even though she did not feel the usual scary aura she feels whenever he is around her. Hearing that Charlotte can feel his aura, Flay informs her of how Haruto has been blessed with exceptional power from infancy. She also tells Charlotte not to fret over such trivial matters, but later in the evening, she informs Haruto of her conversation with Charlotte. This makes Haruto worry that the first time Charlotte actually pays attention to him, she discovers that he has a clone, so he creates surveillance barriers to watch what Charlotte is up to whenever he cannot reach her. For the days that follow, Charlotte begins to watch Haruto closely like a predator patiently waiting for the best time to devour its prey. Then, one evening during dinner, Haruto learns that Charlotte and Natalia are heading out for a festival, which sounds harmless until his surveillance suddenly starts going crazy the moment they leave. Charlotte and Natalia, on the other hand, are currently being attacked by the Empire's soldiers, and while trying to escape, Natalia gets hit in the leg. Right on cue, Charlotte starts receiving directions thanks to one of Haruto's barrier magic, so she gives Natalia directions to a cave where they can hide from the soldiers' wrath. On getting to the cave, they realize that it is filled with luminous flowers that will only make it easy for the soldiers to reach them. So Natalia tells Charlotte to stay put in the cave while she goes to look for the person, whom she identifies as the hero of justice, who gave her directions because she believes such a person must be nearby. Charlotte refuses because she's terrified, but Natalia leaves anyway, because staying together at that point is just a slower way to die. The moment Natalia steps out, the opening suddenly gets blocked, something she quickly recognizes as illusion magic, but before she can pinpoint who is responsible, the soldiers ambush her. This makes Natalia try to end her life because she cannot bear to watch herself being captured, but before she can make do with her threat, Haruto suddenly shows up and saves her. He then turns to the soldiers with rage and casts a spell that sends them flying in different directions. Afterwards, he goes to the cave to tell Charlotte that Natalia is alive but currently passed out. Charlotte, who is currently hiding, feels Haruto's strange aura, so she comes out of hiding to scream his name just as he's about to leave. This shocks him because this is the first time she will be calling him, so when she asks if he is the hero of justice, he plays along by saying yes because he does not want them to start on a bad note. Nothing prepares him for how excited Charlotte is because she believes he is using his powers to take down the bad guys. So he quickly tells her to keep it a secret because he does not want people to know he has such powers yet. Charlotte immediately agrees, promising to lie to Gold, but this just makes Haruto guilty that he is teaching her bad vices just from their first conversation. The next morning, Charlotte barges into Haruto's room like she owns the place to play with him, and Haruto lets it slide because it's oddly relaxing. While at it, Charlotte notices the surveillance barrier in his room and asks about it. He then explains how it's a little trick he built from ancient magic, and Charlotte instantly becomes impressed. He quickly informs her that it has been hard to learn because there is no surviving knowledge on it, but Charlotte counters it and lets him know that there are books on it in their castle's library. To prove her point, she takes him there, and he's caught off guard because he doesn't even know that place exists. She then gathers all the books she can find on ancient magic, and they begin to study it together as their lives depend on it. While at it, Haruto finds out that Charlotte is actually a bookworm who is interested in ancient magic, so they go through the books together. As they continue to read, Haruto notices that some of the things in the book start reminding him of anime, and now he misses anime more than he should. Curious, Charlotte asks what anime is about, and he excitedly explains it to her. After hearing his explanation, Charlotte becomes intrigued and immediately wishes to watch it, so he vouches to make it possible for her. After struggling for 2 weeks, he somehow manages to connect to a modern Japanese network, and he sees that his streaming subscription from his past life is still active. So he creates an account for Charlotte and gives her access to watch it. Charlotte is very happy with this strange magic device with moving pictures until she finds out that she cannot understand the anime's language. He then goes through the stress of teaching her Japanese language, and in just 2 hours, she picks it up way faster than expected. For the days that follow, Charlotte begins to barge into Haruto's room to binge-watch anime, and Haruto begins to worry that she is spending too much time watching them. So after finishing an episode one day, he switches to Big Brother mode and stops her from watching the next one, claiming it's unhealthy. The next morning, Gold and his soldiers head out to deal with some thieves terrorizing their province, and after they leave, Charlotte sadly sits in Haruto's room waiting for Gold's return. Haruto assures her that the thieves are just random petty thieves, so Gold should be back soon, but Charlotte just wonders why people end up going down the path of stealing. Haruto tries to explain that he heard from Gold that it's due to some kind of power struggle, but Charlotte just wants everyone to live happily. A thought soon comes to her head, and she encourages Haruto to use his power to make people happy. Haruto wonders what kind of anime filled her head with that idea, but she continues to plead with him. Since he cannot turn down his little sister's request, he agrees to her crazy idea, and this makes her happy, so she begins to plan how he's going to go about it. She wants him to transform, and even though he thinks it's crazy, he transforms into a very questionable version of a masked vigilante, and even changes his voice to fit his new alter ego. However, he bans Charlotte from following him to carry out his tasks, but he gives her a surveillance device where she can watch his exploits. He then heads out to deal with the thieves that Gold planned to deal with. On getting to them, he drops all of them in seconds without breaking a sweat, only for Gold and his soldiers to arrive seconds later. Gold introduces himself and asks for his identity, but he's too nervous to come up with something on the spot, so he addresses himself as still pending. Confused by his choice of name, Gold asks for what he is trying to achieve, and even though he claims he is an enforcer of justice, he flies away to avoid embarrassing himself any further. After that encounter, Haruto continues his exploits of enforcing justice in his own little way to please Charlotte, until he eventually comes up with the name the Black Knight to address himself. Then, 3 weeks later, Haruto's little project of making a clone finally becomes successful, and it leaves him extremely elated that their attitudes are very similar. Unfortunately for him, he forgets that Charlotte slept in his room the previous night, so when she wakes up to see him and his clone, he tries to think of something, but a knock on the door interrupts him to let him know it's time to get ready for a tour. Apparently, Gold is receiving Marianne and Laius, who are the king's younglings, for a tour in his province because the king wants them to form a relationship to solidify their political alliance. So when Gold addresses them by their title and appreciates them for making the long journey, Haruto finds out that he is indeed staring at his blood siblings. However, Laius is a spoiled brat who feels himself because he is the king's heir, while Marianne is an embodiment of virtue. The way Laius talks to Marianne makes Haruto wonder how Laius grew up to become that stupid, but this only attracts Laius to him. Laius mocks him for having a weak magic level and challenges him to a duel to teach a proper lesson. Soon after, they get ready to face each other, and as Laius charges towards him, Haruto dodges it effortlessly. This makes Laius angry, and he tells him to stop dodging so he can discipline him properly. Haruto complies, and Laius turns him into a punching bag. But while at it, Laius brags by telling him to fight back if he can. As an obedient guy, Haruto gets up in an instant and smacks Laius's head, which makes him kiss the ground instantly. Unable to believe his eyes, Laius stands up to fight back, but he fails terribly, and Haruto ends up winning the fight. Marianne, who was watching the fight as a spectator, asks Gold if Haruto's magic levels are indeed low because the fight she just watched shows otherwise. Gold replies that he is unsure, so he just lets it slide. Laius, on the other hand, refuses to accept defeat and launches a fireball at Haruto, but Haruto's reflexes quickly kick in, and he uses his magic barrier to absorb it, leaving Laius in disbelief. To prove that they are not mates, Haruto lets Laius know that he can return his fireballs to him in the most dangerous way possible, so Laius quickly bows down in defeat. After the fight, Marianne apologizes to Haruto for her brother's stupidity and asks if his magic levels are actually low. Haruto casually confirms her statement and excuses himself to return to his room, but on the way, he can't help but wonder if his real parents are out there looking for him, because he finds it weird that his siblings know about his low magic levels. Later that night, Charlotte shows Haruto the surveillance footage of some suspicious guys, and as they watch the footage closely, Flay interrupts them out of nowhere. She informs Haruto that Charlotte told him about his little secret mission, and she'd love to join. Even though Haruto is against it at first because Flay has a talent for making things unnecessarily chaotic, Charlotte jumps in with a crazy idea of them teaming up, and he gives in. Shortly after, Haruto and Flay begin their joint mission to ambush the suspicious guys they saw earlier. The guys in question wonder who they are, but Flay skips introductions like she's allergic to dialogue and launches straight into attack. This leaves Haruto annoyed that their so-called teamwork is already falling apart because he clearly told her before they started the mission not to be too violent. So he casts a spell to save them from Flay's wrath and goes to calm her down before she burns everything down. After the mission, Charlotte, who was watching them through her surveillance device, talks about how cool their teamwork looked, but Haruto lies on his bed and mentally notes to never involve Flay in anything ever again. Meanwhile, Laius keeps crashing out about the fight he lost to Haruto, especially since he thinks his magic levels are subpar. While at it, a servant interrupts him to inform him that it is time for the welcome banquet. Since he is still touring Gold's province, the servants advise him to go with Charlotte the next day. Laius refuses at first because he does not want anything to do with Gold's family, but after hearing that it is for the king's sake, he changes his mind. After the banquet, Charlotte and Haruto's clone ruin Haruto's sleep by bringing him the banquet's leftovers. Apparently, Haruto got his clone to go represent him at the banquet because he wants to rest, but the clone is not cool with the idea because it was a miserable experience for him, and he wastes no time letting Haruto know. After he is done, Charlotte wonders if the clone is okay, after which he informs Haruto that Laius invited her to join the tour tomorrow. This makes him wonder if Laius has any strange intentions toward Charlotte, and even though he planned to skip the tour, he decides to join them as an overprotective big brother. Later that night, he checks the route of the tour after everyone has slept to see if it is safe. While at it, he sees some strange magicians performing some strange ritual, and he goes to check it out. Soon after, he arrives at the place in his alter ego to ask what the magicians are up to. The magicians, in return, are shocked to see him interrupt their meeting, and they decide to take him out. Since they have chosen violence instead of giving a reasonable answer, he returns the energy by casting a spell to deal with them mercilessly. Seeing that they are about to lose, one of the magicians summons their night skeletons to avenge them. Upon seeing the skeletons, Haruto concludes they look way cooler in video games and takes them out with his sword before they get to him. However, the skeleton just gets up for another round, and he is already expecting that, since they are skeletons, so he tries another method by hitting the red glow in their chests. This leads to a dramatic turn of events, as the skeletons leave him alone and start to attack the magicians instead. Seeing that the skeletons had suddenly turned on their masters, another magician summons a golem to avenge them. This does not work in their favor either because Haruto spots the same weak point mid-fight and goes straight for it, thereby letting the golem work against the magicians. After the fight, Haruto gets the skeletons to tie the guys up like wanted fugitives, and he finds out from their leader that they actually work for the queen. Apparently, the guys were making preparations to summon beasts that would have attacked them on their tour the next day. Surprised by this revelation, he asks the leader for the reason behind it, and he learns that their goal is to eliminate Charlotte before she becomes a threat because her magical talent will surpass the queen's one day, and the queen wants to take her out before that happens. Hearing this makes him realize that the attack on Gold and his soldiers, as well as Charlotte and Natalia, must have been from the queen. Since she also abandoned him at birth, he realizes the queen would do anything to protect her position. So with rage, he swears to stop her no matter what, not caring that she is his biological mother. The next morning, Haruto joins Charlotte, Lias, and Marianne on the world's most awkward ride to the farm they will be touring. Charlotte tries to make the place lively by appealing to Lias to stop sulking because he never had a chance to begin with. This statement just adds salt to Lias's injury, and to make matters worse, Marianne agrees with Charlotte's point. Haruto tries to get the ladies to stop disturbing Lias, but he lashes out at him because he is the last person he wants pity from. He then asks about how Haruto can come up with his fighting technique. Haruto explains how easy it is for him to achieve it, and this surprises both Lias and Marianne. Soon after, they all arrive at the farm and begin to marvel at how beautiful it looks. While taking in the whole area, Haruto goes to meet Gold, who is already in the farm, to ask something that's been on his mind. Gold then takes him to a place where they can sit and tells him to spill, since he rarely comes to him for questions. Haruto asks what Gold will do if he learns that the queen is after Charlotte's life, and even though Haruto tries to act like it's just a casual question, Gold sees sense in the question he is asking. Gold then opens up to him about how he found a letter from the Black Knight, completely unaware he's talking to the same person the previous night about how the queen may be after Charlotte. Haruto wishes he could make the queen go away, but Gold tells him to be careful for what he wishes because although the queen is acting crazy now, there was a time in the past when she helped the Empire to defend the Demon King. He continues by explaining how she became popular after this exploit, that she ends up marrying the king, but unfortunately, the fame got into her head, and she wants the Empire for herself now. Gold then points out that the only person who can overpower her is Charlotte, but she is still young, so Haruto promises to always protect till she's old enough to take over the Empire. News of the Black Knight defeating the Queen's magician reaches the Queen's ears in her palace. On hearing this distasteful news, she grabs the sword she used to defeat the Demon King and talks about how she will use it to take him. Right on cue, Haruto, in his alter ego, makes his presence known by knocking out the Queen's guards first. Afterwards, he comes out to face the Queen, who is surprised to see him because the palace is protected by multiple layers of barriers. Haruto casually tells her that he broke through them without breaking a sweat, and the Queen figures he must be the infamous Black Knight. Annoyed that he even dared to face her, the Queen casts a spell to let him face the consequences of his actions, but Haruto breaks through the spell effortlessly. The Queen refuses to give up by casting several spells to get him, but he matches her aura by blocking all of them. This makes the Queen wonder who this guy actually is, but he interrupts her thoughts by casting a spell she barely manages to dodge. They then continue to engage each other in an intense fight that lasts for hours till Haruto finally gets the upper hand by binding her with a magical collar. He then informs her not to bother using force to open it because it could cost her life. He also warns her not to lay a single finger on the Gold's family and his province, and promises to remove the collar when he sees it fit to forgive her before leaving her behind. 5 years later, Haruto watches Flay and Charlotte happily play with the snow, even though he just wants to be in his room because the cold is too much for him to handle. Soon after, Charlotte forces him to cast a spell to create a hole in the ground, and even though he finds it ridiculous, he does it because he cannot say no to his sister. After he is done, Charlotte happily hugs him as a way of expressing appreciation, only for Gold and Natalia to arrive just in time to see the strange hole. Since he does not want them to know he has powers yet, he quickly comes up with a lie about how the Black Knight must have caused it while passing by. Later on, Gold talks about how the Queen suddenly stopped targeting Charlotte and how the Queen has not made a public appearance in 5 years. He also tells him about the rumor he heard of the Queen wearing a slave collar for a while now, not knowing that Haruto is the one responsible. Hearing this makes Haruto relieved, and since everything is going peacefully, he decides to finally live his idea of a fulfilling life by staying indoors for the rest of his life. He then proceeds to head back to the castle, but Gold stops him in his tracks to inform him that he will be attending the school in the royal capital very soon. This makes him frustrated that his plans are about to fall apart, and he decides he'll make it work no matter what. 2 days later, Gold appeals to him at his home office to go to the school like normal younglings his age, but he refuses. Since this is not the first time Haruto will be rejecting Gold's proposal on schooling, Gold did not bother to send him, but this one is an exception because the king sent a recommendation letter specifically for him. Surprised, he asks why, and even though Gold is unsure, he suggests it may be because of Marianne, since he noticed she took an interest in him during the tour, which honestly doesn't help his confusion because he barely engaged her in a conversation during the tour. His thoughts soon shift to the school in question because he does not have a good track record when it comes to socializing with schoolmates. So when he learns Lias will also be attending the school and even sends him a letter stating they should be friends, he begins to rethink every life choice that led him to this moment. Gold then encourages him to go and gives him fatherly advice on the benefits of going to school. He agrees to go, only to learn that he will need an attendant to accompany him. He refuses at first because he feels he can take care of himself, but Gold lets him know that living alone in an unfamiliar place won't be easy, so he thinks of taking Flay as his attendant. Immediately, Gold counters it, and he knows Gold is right because she would only cause problems for him. So he decides to think of a suitable candidate since he still has 3 months until the school's resumption, but on leaving Gold's office, he returns to his original plan of sabotaging his stay at the school. Inside his room, he informs his clone that he would love it if he goes to school to represent him, but the lazy clone blatantly refuses. He then lets the clone know that, since he cannot do magic, his expulsion from the school will be quick because they will think he is useless. This just makes the clone completely lose it because he feels Haruto is throwing him to the wolves, so Haruto quickly calms him down by promising to give him a barrier that will prevent him from getting hurt, and the clone agrees. The next morning, Haruto lodges in the lakeside log house that he had spent 5 years quietly building as his final destination for where he plans to stay indoors for the rest of his life. While chilling on his sofa and playing video games on his homemade console, Charlotte and Flay, who also know about the apartment, suddenly barged in because Charlotte wants to binge-watch anime. After finishing an episode, Charlotte complains to him about how she has been taking a lot of lessons, so it's been hard to even have time to watch the anime. Haruto then suggests he uses his magic to create a teleportation portal that can allow her to quickly access the apartment since it is quite far from the castle. Soon after, he experiments, but he will need a human to test his authenticity, so Flay quickly suggests they use his clone. He then creates a portal to give him access to his room in the castle, and they see his clone surfing the internet, visibly mad at their interruption. He goes straight to the point and tells him to enter the portal, but the clone refuses to be a lab rat. This makes Flay take matters into her hands by entering the room through the portal and throwing the clone into Haruto's apartment. Thanks to this, they can ascertain the success of the experiment, and the clone returns to the castle through the portal to continue his business. The next day, Haruto, Flay, and Charlotte continue their usual routine at Haruto's apartment. While at it, Haruto suddenly remembers that he has still not found an attendant, so he rushes out of the house before the ladies try to find out the reason behind his sudden outburst. He then strolls in the woods, clearly deep in thought on who may qualify to serve as his attendant, until he notices a bright path and follows it. The path leads him to a village filled with skeletons, and he remembers that he gave the night skeletons that land when he realized that they had nowhere to go after their encounter. On noticing him, the skeletons quickly gather to salute him, and Johnny, the skeleton's commander, appreciates him for making time in his busy schedule to visit them. Not knowing that the visit is purely accidental, Johnny then asks if there is anything he needs, and he asks why monsters are also roaming the village. He learns that they are stray monsters with nowhere to go, so the skeletons decided to accommodate them. Johnny also shows him several districts in the village, and he is impressed by their growth, especially after he finds out that they are also part-time farmers, even though the crops they produce go to the monsters, since they cannot stomach food. This makes him begin to see Johnny in another light, and he starts to think of making him his attendant, but his thoughts soon change when he discovers that Johnny loves yapping like a broken record. Soon after, he excuses himself before Johnny talks his ears off and goes to the stream to relax. While at it, he realizes that he has unknowingly turned the area into a monster's paradise and begins to wonder why nothing ever works in his favor. Gollum, who is also living in the area, soon interrupts his thoughts to sit with him by the stream. He finds out that despite Gollum's huge structure, she is actually a softie at heart, and he would have actually loved for Gollum to be his attendant, but the school's dormitory does not come in extra large sizes, so he returns home with the hope that soon enough he will find an attendant who will be good enough for him. The next morning, while playing video games on his homemade console, Charlotte suddenly interrupts his me time to talk about a suitable name she came up with for the Black Knight. She then informs him of the name Shiva, which belongs to a supreme deity that reigns over destruction and creation, that she found while surfing the internet, and as usual, he puts up with the name. A week later, some adventurers in the province decide to take out a blizzard dragon they come across on the border the province shares with the Empire, because her meat will cost them a fortune. Sensing that she is about to be dinner, the dragon runs for her life, but the windy snow makes it hard for her to move quickly, and she ends up getting trapped in the snow. Shortly after, Haruto and Flay receive news of the dragon's incident from Gold at his home office, and since the dragon is not exactly in their province, Haruto sees no reason to worry about it. Gold points out that it may be quite dangerous in the long run because the dragon may want to seek revenge, so, to be on the safer side, he orders Flay to contain the situation. Flay immediately refuses, claiming that she only follows Haruto's orders. Haruto then steps in to tell her to treat the order as his, only to find out that the reason behind Flay's stubbornness is that the dragons acted as cowards when her species was waging war against humans, so she does not want to associate with them. Sensing that the situation is not something she can find a solution to quickly, Haruto informs Gold that they will get back to him, and they exit the office only to see Charlotte waiting for them at the entrance. Since Charlotte has been eavesdropping on their conversation, she begs Flay to save the dragon because she feels the dragon must be feeling helpless. Flay refuses at first, but Haruto encourages her to take on the task, so she agrees since she cannot defy her master. Soon after, Haruto and Flay pull up to the border to look for signs of the dragon, and on noticing her through the surveillance barrier, they head out to go meet her. Unfortunately, the money-hungry adventurers who have also been looking for her get to her first, but before they can get to her, Flay and Haruto suddenly pull up like her knights in shining armor to protect her by attacking the adventurers. After the fight, Haruto introduces himself to the dragon as the Black Knight, but the dragon just freezes him in response. Haruto breaks free from the ice, understanding that the dragon is probably edgy because of her encounter with the adventurers, so he explains to her that he only came to help her. While at it, he finds out that he can actually hear the dragon's voice, but the dragon is more interested in knowing why Flay, a demon, is serving a human. Flay then uses about an hour to give a vivid explanation of that. After hearing her explanation, the dragon thinks that Haruto is a reincarnated demon king, since he has not yet cleared that cooked-up story, and apologizes to Flay for not joining in the war. Apparently, the dragon does not like violence, but instead enjoys a more introverted lifestyle that allows her to read all the books she wants. It turns out that she came across a book an adventurer accidentally left in her cave, and she has loved reading ever since. She also explains how her cave was suddenly attacked by adventurers, causing her to escape to the province's border. On hearing her story, Flay feels sorry for her and immediately offers to take her to the skeleton's village so she can settle there. The dragon thanks them for their kindness and transforms into a young lady, causing Haruto to quickly create a barrier to clothe her before he relives his trauma with Flay's transformation. After that, he introduces himself officially and agrees to call her Liza since she is a blizzard dragon with no name. Flay instantly steps in to stop their introduction. She then quickly exerts dominance on Liza by claiming that she is the first to serve Haruto, so she had better know her place. Haruto then flies back to the castle and calls on the two to follow him. Liza shows her wings in response and follows Haruto, but this only makes Flay furious, because she has no wings, so she makes up for it by running like crazy. On getting to the castle, Haruto introduces Liza to Gold and Natalia as the Blizzard Dragon and informs them of her desire to work as a maid in the castle. Natalia is excited by how adorable she looks, so she immediately accepts her, and Charlotte also moves closer to her to officially introduce herself and hopes they get along. Gold, on the other hand, is amused that Liza is the Blizzard Dragon they talked about because she looks so small, but he approves of her working as a maid in the castle as long as she abides by the castle's rules. So, the next morning, Flay decides to teach Liza how to work properly as a maid. For the first task, Flay teaches Liza how to use a broom to clean the surroundings, but it turns out that Flay could also use a teacher because she has zero knowledge of the task to start with. Liza then proceeds to sweep the surroundings, and after she is done, Flay is left speechless at how perfectly she did the task. However, she refuses to give up and takes Liza to the kitchen to teach her how to wash the dishes. While at it, she begins her own method, which involves cleaning and breaking the dishes, but Liza does a perfect job by handling the dishes she is assigned to with care. This makes her disappointed, but she refuses to back down. So she moves on to the cooking task, but while she attempts to burn the castle down with her ridiculous attempt at cooking, Liza prepares a decent meal that earns her praises from the other maids in the kitchen. Later that morning, Gold and his family settle down for Liza's meal as breakfast, and as they all eat it, they marvel at how wonderful it tastes. Liza also continues to prove herself by being attentive to Charlotte while she eats, and Natalia takes notice of her. Natalia then asks if there is any other thing Liza is skilled at, and Liza mentions that her love for reading has made her gain some fundamental knowledge on magic. Liza's reply leaves Natalia impressed, and she immediately promotes her to Charlotte's personal maid. The next morning, Liza goes to Charlotte's room to begin her role as Charlotte's personal maid. She wakes her up and gets her ready for magic lessons, after which she takes her to the courtyard to teach her some basic lessons on how to successfully cast a spell while Haruto watches them from afar like an agent looking for young talents to nurture. After the lesson, the two head to the castle's library to continue reading about the magic to improve their knowledge. A few days later, Haruto casually strolls past the courtyard, only for Charlotte to call out to him and show her the huge fireball she managed to create thanks to Liza's help. Haruto is amused by this, only to notice the water Liza is controlling, and he asks her what's up with that. He then learns that Liza is currently doing laundry while also teaching Charlotte magic, and he instantly becomes impressed by her multitasking technique. Charlotte then happily asks Liza to be her friend, and after seeking Haruto's approval, since she is just a maid serving Charlotte, Liza agrees to be her friend. Haruto watches them happily embrace each other, and he begins to think about how well-behaved Liza actually is. Soon after, he realizes that Liza fits perfectly into the attendant role he wants, but when he tries to ask her, he stops midway because he does not want to spoil her budding friendship with Charlotte. Then a thought suddenly crosses his mind that he can use his teleportation portal to transport her to his school as his attendant, and after that, she can return to the castle. So with that out of the way, he returns his focus to his mission to get expelled from the school early. A few weeks later, Charlotte and Liza proceed to return to the castle after Charlotte had just finished watching another round of anime at Haruto's apartment. As they are about to open the door, Haruto casually drops that he will be attending school in the royal capital very soon. Hearing this makes Charlotte begin to worry because of all the bad rumors she has heard about school, so she decides to cancel all her plans for the day and summon a roundtable meeting with her trusted allies. Soon after, the allies, consisting of Charlotte, Flay, Liza, Johnny, and the Golem, gather for a roundtable discussion in the woods. Charlotte informs them that Haruto will be resuming school soon, catching the others completely off guard. Flay furiously wonders why Haruto did not inform her first, but Charlotte tells her to chill since she literally just found out herself. Flay then wonders why Haruto chose school all of a sudden, since she believes he is the Demon King and learning stuff from humans will only undermine his heritage. This statement causes Charlotte to completely lose it because this is the first time she is hearing of Haruto being a Demon King, and she does not find it cool that there is information about Haruto that she does not know about. Johnny quickly steps in to calm her down by stating that Haruto holds her in high regard compared to the rest of them seated, and this makes her blush instantly. So she returns to the main agenda of the meeting and asks why Haruto would willingly choose to go to school himself, because the last time she asked him about school, he described it as a scary and dangerous place. This makes the others grow concerned that the powerful Haruto thinks of school like that. And Charlotte concludes from her knowledge of watching numerous anime that the reason he feels that way is that there is a hidden student council in the school that is actively leading unsuspecting students to the path of destruction. Charlotte then suggests going to the city with Flay and Liza to gather more intel on her theory, while Johnny and the Golem should gather the creatures at the skeleton's village in case things go south. Liza quietly suggests they talk to Haruto first before going on with this bizarre investigation, but Charlotte refuses because she does not want them to stress him over the issue, and the others support Charlotte's opinion. However, later in the night, Liza ignores Charlotte's suggestion and goes straight to report to Haruto about all that went down at their meeting. Haruto thanks her for opening up to him, and he uses the opportunity to officially ask her to be his attendant at his new school. Even though she is shocked by this sudden request, Liza agrees to it, and Haruto becomes relieved that he has finally found himself a worthy attendant. The day Haruto leaves for school finally arrives, and Gold and Natalia bid him farewell. As this is going on, Marian visits Lias in his room to show him the letter she just received from Gold. Lias believes the letter just narrates how Haruto is already on his way to the school, so he does not see any reason why Marianne should make a grand entrance for it. Lias points out that since he worked hard to get the recommendation letter for Haruto, she just thought he would be interested in the letter. Laius then asks why he went through the stress in the first place, and he replies that he just wants to know why Haruto is so strong for someone with low magic levels, and he would love to learn more about him up close. His reply makes her glad that he has changed a bit since his disgraceful defeat to Haruto. The word defeat makes him suddenly feel self-aware that he starts teasing her about how he heard from the guards that she refused to leave her room because she was also protesting to get a recommendation letter for Haruto. Soon after, their conversation shifts to more serious issues like how an extremist group who referred to itself as the Church of Lucifria is quietly brewing, and their influence is beginning to spread over the empire like wildfire. Marianne claims that she heard that the group is trying to overthrow their father, and Laius adds that he heard their mother, the queen, is responsible for their funding. Thoughts of this give him a serious headache because he does not know what their mother is trying to accomplish, especially now that she has a strange collar wrapped around her neck like she's trying to make a fashion statement. Marianne suggests that Haruto is capable of stopping their mother since he is powerful. This statement makes Laius remember that Haruto's province actually has an infamous hero known as the Black Knight, and he suggests asking him for help will get their situation resolved faster. Just in time, their mother walks into their room to interrupt their conversation. With a devilish grin on her face, she grabs Marianne on the neck, leaving Marianne no time to ask for help. Since she's been eavesdropping on their conversation, she concludes that they were mocking her collar, so she decides to take out her anger on her. Laius quickly calls her to order, and she releases Marianne. She then turns to Laius to inform him that she heard that he will be attending the same school as Haruto. She also instructs him to get along with Haruto and find out everything about the Black Knight from him, since they are from the same province. Meanwhile, Haruto is currently chilling in his apartment because the moment he lost sight of the castle, he made a detour to his apartment to rest, since he has already created a teleporting spell that will grant him entrance to the royal capital whenever he wants. After he is done resting, he opens the door that leads him and Liza to the capital, and they begin the long walk to the school. While at it, Liza calls Haruto's attention to an evil bison angrily chasing after a cargo wagon carrying people. He decides to help them since they are not in a hurry, and that is what Charlotte will love him to do anyway. So he transforms into his alter ego and heads off to stop the cargo wagon from collapsing. After that, a lady named Iris, among the travelers, suddenly steps down to play hero by trying to distract the bison and informs the others to run for their lives. However, when the bison reaches her, it flings her away like a piece of paper and rushes to finish her off. While at it, the bison suddenly stops in its tracks and collapses because Haruto got to it first. The lady then tries to thank Haruto, but realizes she is hurt from the attack, so Haruto casts a spell to heal her, leaving her impressed. Soon after, Haruto fixes the cargo wagon, and Iris promises to repay him for his good work if their paths ever cross again. He then goes to return the bison to his herds, an action that makes Iris think Haruto's kind is rare. After returning the bison to the woods, Haruto and Liza continue their journey. Liza points out that Iris feels strange to her, but Haruto tells her to forget about her since they are not going to be staying in the capital for long. Moments later, they arrive at the school gate only for them to see that they have to join a long queue. Seeing the caliber of the people in the queue already makes him want to return to his apartment, but he pushes through the queue regardless, gets in to fill a truckload of registration, and finally gets himself a dorm. However, he is already at his breaking point, so the moment he enters the dorm, he creates a portal that lets him and Liza return to his apartment. Charlotte and Flay are already anticipating his return to the apartment, but he does not match their energy and rests on his sofa. He then complains that he is hungry, and Charlotte suggests they go eat at a restaurant in the capital. Flay immediately kicks against it at first because she would love to prepare a meal for Haruto, but she changes her mind after Charlotte whispers to her that it will help them gather intel for their operation. So they pull up to the capital to eat at a restaurant. After the meal, Charlotte suddenly pulls out a map and begins to give directions to Liza and Flay for the commencement of their operation. This leaves Haruto confused because he thought the plan was to come to the city to play, and Charlotte replies that they can do that on the side, but trying to understand the capital should be a priority. Even though he knows of their plan, he decides to act innocent and play along. So he follows Charlotte around the city, and they use the opportunity to turn it into a siblings' date. They continue to walk about until late in the evening, only for Charlotte to mistakenly bump into Iris, who is passing by. Charlotte quickly apologizes to her just as Haruto notices her. Iris immediately feels like she has met Haruto before because she can sense his powerful magic levels, but Haruto dismisses it, claiming that his magic levels are low. Iris apologizes for the confusion and takes her leave, but as she runs off, Charlotte claims that she senses something weird about her. This makes him remember that Liza also said the same thing, but he refuses to stress over it because he just wants to mind his business and stay in his apartment. 2 days later, Haruto learns from his clone that he will be taking a proficiency test. Apparently, the clone has been in his dorm on his behalf, and a school official showed up to inform him that it is compulsory to take the test before the school's entrance ceremony. Haruto sees this as a golden opportunity to fail miserably and get kicked out of the school, so he decides to go for it. Shortly after, he arrives at the class entrance, but before he can make it in, a professor named Polkos stops him. Polkos quickly recognizes him as Gold's son and escorts him in. Inside the class, Polkos hands him the test question paper, and he begins to write no clue in the answer box since he does not know the answers anyway. He soon gets to a section on barrier magic, and he decides to answer them correctly since it is his specialty, and filling in no clue in all the answer boxes will just raise suspicion. After he is done with the section, he moves on to the next section, which happens to be on ancient magic. Since he has been studying it for a while and he particularly likes a book on ancient magic by an author with a really long name, he decides to answer them correctly, too. By the time he is almost done, he realizes that he has written more than expected, but it is too late to rectify that, so he just submits and hopes it works in his favor. Upon submission, he learns that his magic level will also be tested, and he quickly tells Polkos that his magic is low level. Polkos states that he is just following protocol, so he has no option but to agree. So, he follows Polkos to the professor in charge's office, only to see that he can perfectly fit the professor in question into his backpack without stress. The professor, who introduces herself as Terriet Lucianal, claims that she is a researcher of ancient magic at the school, and students who get on her bad side before the entrance ceremony always end up forfeiting their admission. Hearing this statement pleases Haruto so much that Terriet instantly becomes intrigued by his reaction. Polkos quickly reminds Terriet not to lose track of what they are there for, so she collects Haruto's script from Polkos to go through it. Afterwards, Haruto places his hand on the crystal ball to weigh his magic level, but the crystal ball breaks into tiny pieces. Seeing this makes Haruto happy that Terriet will get angry and kick him out of the school, but Terriet is just massively impressed. She claims that his ability to break the crystal ball proves that he possesses strong magic. Referring to his script, she praises him for being technical with his answers, and the section on ancient magic makes her feel like she is reading her own book. This is how he realizes that the book on ancient magic with the long author name that he loves to read actually belongs to her. So instead of getting kicked out, Terriet decides to take him under her wing before the other professors get to him. He soon finds out from her interaction with Polkos that the whole proficiency test was just a ploy to get her close to him, and he becomes annoyed, so he refuses to join her lab and takes his leave. The day of the entrance ceremony finally arrives, and Charlotte hands another clone of Haruto that the gang as a weapon he can use to defend himself in case things go south. Apparently, the real Haruto created him to go to the entrance ceremony on his behalf, but even though he shares the same memory with the real Haruto, he possesses no magic. The only thing defending him at the moment is the gun and the defensive magic Haruto cast on him before he took his leave. After the entrance ceremony, Haruto's clone rushes back to his dorm room, only for him to see some extroverts passing by. He immediately hides from their presence because he does not want their trouble, but as he continues his quiet walk, he accidentally bumps into Iris's rice cakes. The commotion attracts one of the extroverts named Schneidel, who happens to be the vice president of the student council, but he is more concerned about why Iris did not greet him when she passed by him seconds ago. Iris apologizes to him, stating that she does not know she had to do that, since she just resumed at the school that day and knows nothing about the rules. He then points to Haruto's clone to explain the rules to her, but Bro just comes up with a dramatic excuse to use the restroom. This only makes Schneidel angry, and he casts a spell to eliminate him. Haruto's clone falls to the ground after the hit, but he stands up unscathed seconds later, thanks to the real Haruto's defensive barrier. Schneidel, on the other hand, is surprised he escaped that spell, so Haruto's clone quickly fakes pain with the hope of escaping. Unfortunately, Schneidel does not fall for his Oscar-winning performance, so Iris steps in to try to contain the situation. However, the two guys don't understand what she is saying, so Schneidel resorts to casting his spell, but Haruto sees reflexes quickly kick in, and he shoots him with his gun before running as fast as his legs can take him. Inside the dorm, he explains the whole situation to the real Haruto. After he is done, the real Haruto sends him back to his apartment and begins to wonder why a magical battle should even happen on school premises in the first place. Later in the evening, he receives a letter from another member of the student council stating that Schneidel has challenged him to a duel, and he sighs in frustration. Soon after, he sees Iris getting into a carriage with the lady who delivered the message to him through his surveillance barrier, so he watches them to see what they are up to. Apparently, Iris saw when the letter got delivered to him, so she followed the deliverer to Schneidel's house to appeal to him to call off the duel. Schneidel tells Iris to dance with her clothes off so that he can consider her appeal, and she surprisingly agrees. While at it, Haruto, who is watching the whole thing through his surveillance camera, decides to help her out by sending Schneidel into a special dimension so that he can personally deal with him in his alter ego. He then casts a heavy block on his shoulder for his sins and informs him not to try to use magic to heal it because it will only hurt him more. He also tells him to call off the duel, and he will consider taking the block off before taking his leave. News of Haruto taking on Schneidel soon reaches the whole school the next morning, and the professors call him to a meeting to gush over him like he is some kind of hero, since they don't like Schneidel's personality. After the meeting, he is disappointed by the outcome because he thought they called him in to expel him for getting into a fight on school premises. On the way back to the dorm, he runs into Terriette, who is still hell-bent on getting him to join her lab, and she pulls him to a corner to explain how joining a lab is necessary. She then explains how he must choose either joining a night class, where he will get hands-on training on how to be a knight in the future, or joining the research class, where he will learn how to create magic. She also points out how she noticed his interest in ancient magic from his test scripts and encourages him to work with her since that is her specialty. While still trying to rope Haruto into her class, Laius sees them from afar and immediately rushes to Haruto to greet him because he has missed him. Haruto does not recognize him at first, so he instantly tackles him, but after seeing Marianne also walk up to them to condone Laius for running, he quickly remembers him. Haruto then catches up with Marianne, and as their conversation progresses, Marianne asks if he would like to join her research lab. Laius quickly cuts to demand that Haruto join him, and to make matters worse, Terriette also joins in the bickering. Soon after, Iris joins them because she has a question to ask Haruto. Haruto sees this as an opportunity to escape these angry birds, so she grabs her hand and runs off. After escaping them, Haruto apologizes to Iris for letting her go through the stress and asks what's up. Iris then asks if he was the same person he met yesterday because she feels they are different. This shocks Haruto, and he accidentally pulls up his alert mode barrier out of reflex. He then concludes that she is not an ordinary person, for her to be able to distinguish that, and to further prove his point, this chick senses that he put up a barrier even though she cannot see it. Haruto then switches to investigative mode and asks why she thinks he is different from yesterday. She explains that she did not sense any magical force around him the previous day, but today, she can feel a force strong enough to even knock her down. Since the only other person to sense his magical force is Flay, and she is a demon, he asks if she is also a demon. Surprised by his question, she begins to check her body to see if there is anything that gave up that question. After confirming that it is just an assumption on his part, she claims that she is human. So he tells her to just think of them as the same people in response to her previous question, and she begs him to be her friend in return. Haruto wonders why she wants them to be friends, and she replies that since they keep running into each other, maybe it is fate's way of telling them to be friends. He also learns that she was abandoned at birth and 4 times after that because she spoke as a baby, which is quite unusual. So she ended up in a monastery, but the only priest who was nice to her there passed away when she was 5. This makes her stop interacting with anyone in general, and that is why people find it hard to understand her, because it took a long time for her to start interacting with people again. Hearing this makes Haruto conclude that he cannot be her friend. Based on his track record, he does not have any friends because he always loves to keep to himself, and he lacks common sense. However, this just makes Iris want to be his friend even more, and she encourages him that they can learn common sense together. Since Iris is locked in on them being friends, he decides to use her to his advantage because he thinks that is how friendship works. So he asks what research lab she will be enrolling in, only to learn that it is Terriette's lab. This leaves him no choice, and he decides to join her there, which makes her extremely happy that he almost fell for her charming smile. In the meantime, Flay, Liza, and Charlotte are having an evening bath in Haruto's apartment since he is not at home. Charlotte and Liza then begin to engage in a conversation, and Liza learns that Flay used to work for the Demon King before the Queen defeated him. Flay then uses the opportunity to talk about the Demon King at length. Apparently, the Demon King was a kind soul who always put demons and monsters first, but his kindness made him disagree with some demons on how to treat humans because his dream was to create a paradise where humans and demons could coexist. Flay also points out that the Demon King must have lost the fight to the Queen on purpose because he wanted to sacrifice himself to allow the other demons to escape. Flay is also sure that the king has probably reincarnated as a human to change humans' perspective on demons. Liza is so impressed by the story that she asks for the Demon King's name, and Flay replies that his name was Iris. Back at the school, Haruto and Iris proceed to Haruto's dorm to finish signing up for classes. On opening the door, they see Charlotte inside watching anime. Immediately, Charlotte gets the wrong impression and thinks they are dating, but Haruto quickly corrects her, and Charlotte becomes relieved. She then begins to embrace Haruto, causing him to think that she is still stuck in the phase where little sisters love their older brothers until they grow up, and everything the brothers do irritates them. Iris, on the other hand, is confused with their definition of sibling interaction, and Haruto uses the opportunity to introduce them to each other officially. After the introductions, Haruto and Iris settle down and begin to pick their classes. While Iris fills out her own form like a normal student, Haruto uses a dice to pick his classes like the unserious student that he is. Soon after, he gets bored and asks a happy Charlotte to complete the forms on his behalf. After she is done filling the forms, Charlotte excuses himself to return to the castle, and Haruto quickly covers Iris's eyes to avoid her seeing his little secrets. Iris gets curious after Haruto removes his hands, but Haruto tells her not to fret over it and encourages her to let them work together even though he plans to get himself expelled. The next morning, Haruto receives a breakdown of his first class schedule at his apartment from Charlotte, who pulls an all-nighter to set it up. He learns that he will be placed in the middle class because of his performance on the proficiency test. Charlotte also explains that he can move up to the top class in little time if he becomes serious with his studies, but he sincerely hopes he does not. He then heads to the school with Liza through the portal, only to meet Iris already waiting for him. He introduces Liza to her as his attendant since it is the first time she will be meeting her officially, and they shake hands. Soon after, they head to class, and Iris is shocked to learn that Haruto is placed in the middle class despite his skills. She then bids him farewell when she gets to the top class where she is placed, but after Iris enters her class, Liza questions if Haruto is sure Iris is indeed human because, looking at her up close, she still can't tell if she is a demon or human. Haruto replies based on what he knows that she is not a demon, and since she is not causing trouble, they don't need to worry about her. On getting to his class, his colleagues start to stare at him like he is some kind of hero because of the Shenadel situation. He takes his seat at the back of the class, but that does not stop his colleagues from staring at him still. Soon after, his professor starts the lessons for the day, and he learns that they will be taking another test to determine if they will level up to a top class or be placed in a lower class. This pleases him because it is the perfect opportunity to flunk the test, but on getting the questions, he finds out that the questions are very easy to answer, so even little Charlotte finished the topic in the first 6 months of her education. Feeling like his intelligence is being insulted, he thinks of a perfect way to flunk the test without making it look intentional, so he concludes on writing with the hope of getting a 60 pass mark, but after the test is over and the results are announced, he learns that he scored the highest compared to the others who failed woefully. This makes him realize that the questions are actually pretty advanced, and the reason why he understands this is that his sister is a genius. The professor then lets him know that he will be placed in the top class from the next lesson, leaving him extremely disappointed. Later in the day, he resumes at the top class, only to find out that he will be sharing the class with Iris and Laius. Soon after, a professor named Oratoria arrives to begin her class with them. Judging from her stance, Haruto senses that Oratoria must be a very tough nut to crack, and to make matters worse, Oratoria singles him and Iris out for joining Terriette, whom she is not fond of, in her research lab, and she promises to take extra diligence while teaching the two of them. After that, she begins teaching properly, and while at it, she asks difficult questions that Haruto answers correctly because he is quite familiar with the theory. This really impresses Oratoria because the theory he explained belongs to a mysterious individual who always sends research papers to the school, and she believes having an answer to that just shows how outstanding he is. She then pesters him to leave Terriette's lab and join hers, but Haruto politely declines, with Iris backing him up. Later in the evening, Haruto and Iris visit Terriette to officially sign up for her mansion. This makes Terriette so excited that she accidentally spills that signing up for the lab shows that the lab won't be closed down since they now have new members. Before he can protest, Terriette suggests they throw a party, and she gets to work. Unknown to them, the Haruto present is actually Haruto's clone because the real Haruto claims that he is too tired to go after his strenuous classes. So when he tries to sneak out since he thinks he is done with his mission, Polkos's voice suddenly interrupts him. He and the others then go to check up on him, and they realize that it is because he saw a passed-out Schneidel. Haruto immediately thinks he is dead, but Terriet clears the air by stating that she forgot him there while trying to fix his shoulder. She then explains how he suddenly showed her the door the previous day because he wanted her to try treating his shoulders after claiming that he had been attacked with a magic spell. Since he is currently passed out, Terriet decides to turn this situation into a teaching class, with him acting as a specimen. So she begins to teach them about the spell that was cast on his shoulder, and on pointing out that it is barrier magic, Haruto's clone starts to panic that, with her level of smartness, she may soon figure out that the real Haruto is responsible for the attack. To prove his suspicion right, she figures soon after that the attacker responsible is someone who is a pro at using ancient magic. She then begins to ask them who is responsible. Iris immediately claims she is innocent since she cannot use such ancient magic, so Terriet turns to Schneidel and slaps her back to reality so he can tell her who the culprit is. On regaining consciousness, Schneidel sees Haruto's clone and becomes furious since he is still mad that he humiliated him. Terriet quickly reminds him that he still has his shoulder issue and also lets him know that the person who can heal him is the person who put him in the state in the first place. So she encourages him to spill who is responsible. Schneidel then describes the Black Knight, even though he finds it humiliating, and Terriet's mind only goes to one person. She turns to Haruto's clone to ask about the Black Knight, since the description Schneidel gave fits him perfectly, and Haruto's clone is from the Black Knight's province. Haruto's clone quickly denies knowing him, but Terriet becomes suspicious that the timing of the Black Knight being in the capital is coincidental with when he starts school, and she begins to beg him to spill the tea. Just in time, the real Haruto arrives at the mansion in his Black Knight outfit. He tells Terriet to stop disturbing Haruto's clone because they are not affiliated, and he is just there on his own to enact justice in the capital. Terriet becomes starstruck, and she asks if he dealt with Schneidel because he is a member of an evil society. This is news to Haruto, but he plays along and tells Schneidel to cancel the duel in exchange for healing him. Since he has no choice, Schneidel agrees to Haruto's terms. After the real Haruto takes his leave, Terriet throws a celebratory party in honor of her new research students. While at it, Haruto's clone can feel Polko staring at him intently, so he asks what's up. Polko awkwardly replies that he feels that their personality is the same since he was forced to the party just like him. As they continue to make small talk, Haruto's clone learns that Polko's actually used to be Terriet's teacher, but because of her genius ability, she enrolled in the school, and he was assigned to keep an eye on her till she ultimately rose to a professor level. Meanwhile, Schneidel is currently crashing out in his apartment because the next morning, the students at the school will find out that he has canceled the duel, and this will make him look like a coward. With rage, he calls on his father's special unit officers to go eliminate Haruto and the other three who watched his humiliation that afternoon, not knowing that Haruto has a surveillance barrier in his apartment that lets him see all his activities. Soon after, the officers arrive in front of Terriet's mansion while the four of them are peacefully asleep. After confirming that they are indeed asleep and all the officers are in their respective positions, one of the officers rushes to the mansion in full force, only to be stopped by a barrier that sends him to the ground immediately. This makes the others realize that an invisible wall is protecting the mansion, so they try to look for ways to break it. While at it, a door suddenly appears, and another officer proceeds to open it, only for him to be dragged inside. The door then starts to multiply, and multiple Harutos dressed as Black Knight suddenly starts coming out of them. This leaves the soldiers confused until the real Haruto finally arrives and seals the soldiers on the spot with his magic. After that, he returns them to Schneidel's apartment with their hands tied to their back, catching Schneidel completely off guard. Like a cop patiently waiting to question a suspect, Haruto sits in the middle and asks Schneidel if the soldiers were from him. Schneidel denies his involvement instantly to avoid facing his wrath. This makes Haruto pull up the footage of him when he was ordering the soldiers a few hours ago, and Schneidel becomes instantly surprised by the level of magic he is using. Seeing that Schneidel has no remorse, and the spell he cast on his shoulder is not enough to teach him a lesson, Haruto contemplates giving him a real punishment. Before he can come up with one, Schneidel quickly grabs a syringe he has been saving for times like this and injects himself. This makes him suddenly transform into a demon, thereby catching Haruto completely off guard, and he wonders what kind of plot twist is going on. Before he can fully grasp the magnitude of what is going on, Schneidel punches him out of the mansion and follows him. Haruto wonders how he can tame this mysterious demon in front of him, and while at it, Charlotte calls him through the surveillance barrier because she suspects something must be up with him, even though the situation does not give time for a brother and sister bonding. Haruto takes the time he does not have to explain to her that he is currently fighting a mysterious demon, and came up with a lie about how an organization experimented on Schneidel and eventually turned him into a demon. This makes Charlotte feel pity for Schneidel, and he pleads with Haruto to save Schneidel. Her response catches him by surprise because there is no way he can save this demon in front of him. After thinking for a minute, he promises to do his best for Charlotte's sake and proceeds to cast a spell. However, the spell does not work on him, and he squeezes Haruto with his arms in response. Haruto then casts barrier spells to stop his arms, causing him to break free from his hold. The barriers keep Schneidel's arm frozen, and when he tries to attack Haruto, his arms explode. However, he regenerates his arms seconds later, causing Haruto to wonder how he is going to save this walking time bomb. Right on cue, Charlotte calls him again since she is also watching the fight through the surveillance barrier to inform him that there is something weird about Schneidel. Charlotte then explains how she thinks he has reduced in size after he regenerated, and this makes them conclude that the only chance they can have at saving him is to keep suppressing him with barrier magic. Haruto then casts a spell to launch 1,000,000 blades on Schneidel at once, and he returns to his original state soon after. Ashamed to face him, Schneidel crawls back to his apartment, so Haruto decides to leave him be. Haruto's clone wakes up very early the next morning at Terriet's mansion and goes to check out the skies. The real Haruto suddenly appears beside him, and they start to talk about how their new life is way better than the past life they lived. Later in the morning, Flay and Liza continue their side quests of investigating any strange things happening in the capital. While at it, some street guys try to take advantage of Flay, but Flay teaches them a lesson they won't forget by beating them to a pulp, and Liza uses the opportunity to ask if there have been any strange happenings in the capital. Thanks to their intel, they return to the woods for a roundtable meeting to give the others the latest update. The others learn that the king and queen are on bad terms regarding a power struggle, thereby causing political unrest. Charlotte then somehow connects that Schneidel, being the vice president of the student council, was acting on orders from the hidden student council to take out Haruto. Her theory leaves the others confused, but Charlotte continues to talk about how she thinks the council researched his powers and decided to take him out. She then continues her crazy logic by connecting the student council to working for an evil society that serves the queen. So, she suggests they try to infiltrate Haruto's school first to gather intel on who may be working for the evil society, and urges them to work as one, so that they can protect Haruto. The others agree with her, and they end their meeting. Unknown to them, Haruto is watching their shenanigans through his surveillance barrier, and even though he thinks they may be going too far with infiltrating his school, he sees sense in what they said. So, he pulls up multiple surveillance barriers to watch Charlotte and others for when they begin their ridiculous plan to keep them safe. That's the end of today's video. If you stayed until now, write "fa" in the comments. Give me plenty likes, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see another recap like this. Peace.